First of all, let me say it's an honor to work for the people of this state. It's an honor to work for the people of the Northern District. Every one of us who are in public office are there not because we own a title, not because we were somehow privately anointed or publicly appointed. We're there because the citizenry chose us to go in and occupy that office in a manner of trust for the time in which we've been elected. I tried every one of these speeches, whether it's a civic club or a town hall meeting. We've done 65 plus, I think, in my district since I've been there, to always say, me and my staff keep very much forefront in our minds the fact that we work for the public, and these offices don't belong to us, they belong to you. So let me say thank you for allowing me to work for you. Thank you for giving that honor to me, and we know that you're the boss, and we keep that very much center of our mind. A lot's going on with the Public Service Commission. If you've read the papers lately, I don't have to tell you that. We've got a lot of issues on the forefront, a lot of things that are happening throughout our state that impact consumers, impact the business community, impact industrial recruitment, impact our state as a whole. Right now, I know we'll get into some other maybe hotter issues toward the end of the talk and during the Q&A, but I want to tell you about some things we're doing to make sure we keep a priority in our agency and in our office to make sure we're reducing rates and saving people money. I hear a lot of talk. I was a mayor, as he told you before. During my time as mayor, we were fortunate enough to cut property taxes 2 times, not just once, but twice. First time that had ever been done. And I'm proud of that, but you hear a lot of people talk about property taxes and how much an increase on property taxes will hurt, and I agree with that 100%. Most Mississippians will pay more in 3 months this summer in utility costs than they will pay all year for their property taxes. The companies that we regulate, the charges that we regulate, affect Mississippians every single solitary month. It affects their bottom line if they're a small business owner. It affects their family budget if they're just working folks in Mississippi who are trying to struggle and make it. So every dime that we can safeguard, every penny that we can scrutinize of charges that go out to customers is exactly what we should be doing. Now the Bible says where much is given, much is required. You've all read that scripture. And I believe when you're given the benefit of no competition, and you've been given the benefit of selling a product that the public must have, can you imagine in a Mississippi summer, can you imagine in one of these 100-degree days, we're saying, well, our family budget's just a little bit too tight. This month we're going to call Mississippi Power, Entergy, or Electric Power Association, just tell them to cut the power off this month so we can save on it. Imagine a small business owner throughout our state. Many of our small business owners who are forgotten, left out, not at the table. These small business owners who have to pay these bills and make a choice each month about their small business budget. They can't choose not to have power. They can't choose if they have operations related to natural gas. They can't choose not to have this utility service. And they can only get it from one provider. So where much is given, much must be required. And that's why I feel like that the strong stance that I've tried to take the last years that I've been on the commission is a stance not only I believe the people I represent would want, but also I think it's what's right for the people of this state. I would love to be the only guy in Lee County, Mississippi that you could buy your groceries from. I'd love to have that. I'd love if you wanted to have milk and bread, you had to come to my grocery store. And it didn't matter what my product was or what I charged, that would just be fine because you had to come to me. That is why it's important that the commission stay vigilant, stay totally affirmed in its commitment to bringing rates down, to fighting for every penny for customers throughout our state. And it's something that I'm not going to give up on as long as I'm on that commission because I think it's where the rubber meets the road. Again, most Mississippi families will pay more in the summer months for their power than they'll pay all year for property taxes. And I am just blown away by so-called conservative groups who continue to say that it's okay to raise people's power bills. It's okay to raise people's energy costs. While at the same time, and rightfully so, if you were talking about a 13 or a 20% increase in taxes on businesses, there would be marching in the street, and rightfully so. Where is the indignation? Where is the outrage when it comes to raising month-to-month cost for businesses? Where is it? It's bumper sticker babble. When you hear people talk about, I'm pro-business and I'm conservative, but yet I'm hush-mouthed and lock-jawed and gone mute when it comes to raising people's energy costs each month. Rick Bragg's one of my favorite authors. If you've never read any of his books, you ought to take a weekend and do that. He wrote a book called All Over But the Shouting. He gave a speech to the Alabama legislature as they were coming in a couple of years ago. The new legislature was coming in. And the title of that speech was Remember My People. And he talked about the families and the people in Alabama who are struggling to make ends meet. He talked about that lady at the Waffle House who's having to wipe a table right now and collect tips. And where is her voice in state government? Well, I would say, where is that lady's voice in state government? Where is that lady's voice when it comes to utility rates and increases? Where is the voice of the small business owners? Where is the voice of the people who are just struggling, who don't have a PAC, who don't have any high-powered lobbyists, who just are out there struggling day in and day out? Where is their voice? I feel like if I, as a commissioner, don't stand up for those people, they're not going to get stood up for in many cases. Not throwing off on one of my fellow commissioners, I'm talking about the people that I represent. Those are the folks who are forgotten. I remember when we were in the Kemper debate, and it's now $4.3 million, a guarantee of 260 jobs. If you do the math on that, that's $18,500,000 per job to create those permanent jobs. Time after time in these hearings, groups came up with letters, and some politicians took time out of their day to come over and ask us please to pass this thing. I got a letter from Governor Barbour who said that it would be awful and outrageous if we didn't change our stance and approve that. Well, let me tell you what's awful and outrageous. What's awful and outrageous is a senior citizen on the coast having to split a pill in half because she can't afford to pay her power bill, so she has to try to make her medicine go a little further. What's outrageous and awful is small business owners who are being hurt. They had already had Hurricane Katrina, then the BP oil spill, and now the thanks they get is almost a 20% rate hike on their power bills. That's what's outrageous and awful. What's outrageous and awful is the fact that this comes under the guise of phony conservatism and saying, well, it's okay. It's all right for us to raise power bills because of who it is that's asking us to raise power bills. It's ridiculous. The people of Mississippi deserve better. We deserve better to know that companies who have no competition, most of y'all are business people, you got to fight every day for the customer you want to get and fight every day to keep the customer you have. Our public utilities don't have that. It's awful and outrageous to think that those people have been left behind and forgot about throughout this process. We were promised that Mississippi Power could build this plant for $2.4 billion. Today it's $4.3 billion. Where's the end? There's no end in sight. It's not my hunch is that it's not going to come online on time, and the costs continue to soar. I said back in 2010, I brought a copy of my dissent to make sure I didn't say this wrong, but it is prudent to wait. I said on balance, it's prudent to wait until we see the future better. The electric industry is filled with continuous change and uncertainty. This proposal contains an inordinate amount of uncertainty all at once, with gas prices and technology and other things going on. With this amount of uncertainty, it's better to make small bets than large bets. Now, the decision's been made, and the train's on the track. Our job is to guard every dime at that facility and make sure we're saving as much of the customer's money as we can. But I think it's more emblematic of a larger problem. I think it's more symptomatic of a bigger issue at stake here. And it's about issues of who gets what benefits. I'm proud that Joey Miller and Andy Taggart are here from representing our rural small telephone companies. They can tell you we're fighting every single day to make sure we're getting as much federal money as we can get into the state of Mississippi to bring broadband out to rural areas. I don't hear anybody griping about that federal money. You see, I think we're not getting too much federal money in Mississippi. I don't think we're getting enough. We need to milk that cow for every drop we can get, because I would love to see us use money from California and New York and Illinois and Indiana right here to help Mississippians. We shouldn't turn that back. I don't see anybody fighting to say, let's not take the money that benefits our telephone companies. But who does it benefit when we raise rates as high as they've gone because of this Kemper facility? I think it's an issue we're going to grapple with in this state for a very, very long time. I said earlier, it's a train on a track. I don't know where it's going to stop, but it has great implications economically and great implications public policy-wise. You know, it was sold back in the press 3 years ago that, oh, this is a pay-as-you-go. Baloney. It's not a pay-as-you-go. It's a pay before you go. It's a pay me up front and let me use your money to finance my technology, raise your rates, and then maybe if it works good, maybe if it doesn't work, who cares? To me, that's a bad public policy. To me, that's wrong. And I think it leaves that lady at the Waffle House behind. I think that it leaves many Mississippi small business owners behind. It's interesting to see some of our bigger, larger manufacturers come to the commission and ask time and again for a special rate. Special rate. Give us a better deal than somebody else. Many times it's our casinos. Well, you can bet one thing. I will never support a special rate that alleviates anybody from paying their cost of this plant. It's not fair to shift that to residential customers. It's not fair for a system to be set up where those people are shielded from costs and the average guy and gal and family and small business owner has to pay. I have really and truly been amazed to see the lineup come before the commission of elected officials and others saying, please pass this on. Please do this. Please pass this plant. And not any one of them has said anything whatsoever. I said earlier, hush mouth, lockjawed, and mute when it comes to the impact on the family budget. When on earth did a monopoly's budget become more important than the family budget? When did a monopoly's budget become more important than the small business budget? And so I think we're going to live with this consequence of this action for years and years to come. There's been a lot of work over the last couple of years on this particular case and on this issue, and I applaud my other commissioners for working very hard to make sure, as much as possible from their point of view, that that costs are contained. I think that if it were left up to me, we would have waited to see what would have been best for the people of Mississippi. I think it's egregious, and it has a long-term policy implications that we're going to see the bad side of for years and years to come. It's a very interesting time to be sitting in the seat that we're sitting in. Where Mississippi goes now related to these costs and what it does to our economy is going to be something that I think all of us will have to live with for years and years and years to come. I said the last time that I was here a couple of years ago that these labels that get thrown around about pro-business, anti-business, you're not for the corporate world, you're anti-this, anti-that, they kind of go out the window at our agency. I voted against more rate increases than anybody on the Public Service Commission since there's been a Public Service Commission. There's not one commissioner in the past or otherwise that's more fiscally conservative than I am when it comes to spending the consumer's money. So all those labels go out the window. And it comes down to not what's a Republican issue or a Democrat issue or what's a right issue, a left issue, a liberal or conservative. It's what is right and what is wrong. And I feel like that we're going to see the perils of this public policy allowing companies to pay before you go, collect from ratepayers, and go forward. I feel for those 185,000 customers on the coast who are going to have to pay for this. Let's all hope that this plant works. It's yet to be seen. If it doesn't work, that's one more hurdle in this situation we're going to have to overcome, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. I was amazed by the support that came to raise people's rates. I'm still baffled by that in many, many ways. Let me close by saying this. Over the past, 2013, 6 years, we have worked together at the commission in lots of ways. I've told you about where we were split 2-1. But here's where we've worked together, and I think it's some things that have made a big difference in our state. We've looked at companies who have no competition but yet want to spend millions of dollars in advertising telling you how great they are. Well, you can't choose anybody but them. Companies like Mississippi Power who filed to recover $2 million in private corporate jet expense. We're working very hard at the commission to hone in and to scrutinize every penny that customers pay, and we're not going to give up on that. I'll close with this little story. Y'all all remember Charles Carrault, who was the guy that had a show on Sunday morning. I think it was On the Road with Charles Carrault. One time he was up in North Carolina at a guy who was a master carver. I mean, this fella could take, Andy, he could get a stump out of an old river bottom and put it up on the porch, and before you knew it, he carved away, and there would be a yellow lab. He'd carve a little bit more, and there would be a blue heeler. And there was a lady there with her 2 sons. She said, "Sir," said, "I want to ask you something." Said, "How do you do this masterful work, this art that you do carving?" He said, "Oh, it's real simple." Said, "I get up every morning, say my prayers, get in there and eat my breakfast. I take this old double X case knife, for y'all country folks in here, you know what I'm talking about, a double X case knife, and sharpen it." He said, "I pull that stump up there and I carve away everything that doesn't look like a dog." Well, our job at the Public Service Commission is to carve away everything that doesn't look like the public's interest. $2 million in corporate jet expense, carve it out. Ads, bragging on companies that don't even have any competition so you can't choose anybody else, carve it out. Bloated, and I say the word bloated, executive expense salary packages, we're working to carve them out. And we're going to continue carving on your behalf and on the behalf of the lady at the Waffle House, the small business owner, the entrepreneur out there trying to make it in this state, and the people who have some competition. It's our job to hold these companies accountable, and I'm bound and determined that we do it. So thank you very much for letting me be with you, and I know if you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
We'll now enter into the part of the program where we have questions and answers with the Capitol Press Corps. So if you would, just raise your hand, state your name and the media organization that you're with, and then ask a question. So, Wyatt Emmerich.
Wyatt Emmerich, Emmerich Newspapers. With Kemper, it's just a huge amount of money. If it doesn't work, is there a way to claw back and make the Southern stockholders pay for it and not the Mississippi ratepayers? Or is it just, I mean, through either prudency review, is there a way to share this burden?
That's a very good question. When we were faced with that 3 years ago, I talked about, in that 20-something page dissent, Mr. Emmerich, what I thought would be a situation of too big to fail. Mississippi Power Company's net utility plant rate base at the time in which this case came before the commission was $1.208 billion. This plant is now at $4.3 billion. So you realize that we're past the point of no return in the sense of if it doesn't work, you've got an asset in which all of this money has been accrued to. That, excuse me, I don't know what that was. That's all right. Okay. So I think it does put the commission in a too big to fail scenario. And by that I mean that this happened in Michigan. One of Mississippi Power Company's witnesses, Stephen Fetter, who was a commissioner in Michigan at one time when we had the case, he said, yes, I even had a scenario like that when I was commissioner, that there was a plant built, it didn't work, and we had to allow in the rate-based cost to keep the company from going bankrupt. So yes, I mean, I think that is a very much of a possibility. If this plant doesn't work, and that's what makes the pay before you go baseload act, construction work in progress so egregious, is that if it doesn't work, then you're just there. Now, there are some provisions of getting refunds and that sort of thing, but why should I, as a customer, invest in your technology that's never been, by the way, deployed anywhere in the world? This tree technology is not. So there are some, I think, very limited clawback provisions, but I think it comes down to a too big to fail scenario, whether or not you allow the company to go bankrupt. I think that's a hard choice that I wish the commission had not put itself in.
As a follow-up, what's the problem with Mississippi Power going bankrupt?
Well, I understand. I'm just saying that is a scenario in which could, in fact, happen. And I thought when I wrote the dissent 3 years ago, was a very big possibility that the commission should try to avoid as a matter of being balanced. I personally think the plant was too big for the company size. The technology had not been tried. It was supported by everybody from then Lieutenant Governor Phil Bryant, Governor Haley Barbour. Governor Bryant came over and asked us at a commission hearing to vote for this. Governor Barbour, Secretary Chew, they all wrote and said, oh, this is a great thing to do. Just do it, do it, do it. And I don't think anybody thought about how do you balance out. I'm talking about those people who wrote us those letters and came over and asked us. How do you balance out the scenario? But I think it is one in which could very well play out where the company could have serious long-term financial problems. It's just too big for the company. Yes, sir.
Name and the media organization that you're with.
My name is Kelly Williams. I'm with the Bigger Pie Forum.
Yes, sir.
On April the 23rd, the chairman was interviewed, TV interview, at which he was asked, how much is the commission going to approve for the customers to pay for this plant? He said $2.4 billion, as we've been saying for 2 years. It's $2.4 billion. My question is, has that been deemed prudent?
Well, let me say this. I have great respect for my colleague, Commissioner Vance. We work together, and I respect him and Commissioner Posey immensely. We have to disagree from time to time, and I do that vigorously when we do. I can't speak for him, what his opinion or what his philosophy is on this. It's very clear that the first order that came out in April of 2010 limited the cost to $2.4 billion. The second order allowed it to go to $2.88 billion. So when he says that, and I'm not trying to be smart with you, it's just that that may be his philosophical view about it. The projected costs right now are $4.3 billion. There's not been a dime, one dime, not a dime of the cost deemed prudent yet. There's not been any of that. Those prudency hearings will come, but nothing has been deemed prudent yet. And in a way, personally, I think that there's some give and take on that. Sure, you might have looked at it earlier and said this is not a prudent stop. The other part about it is you're looking now at the entire project, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. The problem with all of this is the shifting of risk. And the risk are no longer with Southern Company and Mississippi Power. They're on the customers. And so this is the greatest, get this now, this is the greatest transfer of wealth in the state of Mississippi from customers to a monopoly in the history of the state. The greatest transfer of wealth. Where are these so-called conservative groups raising Cain about that? Yes, sir. But
where does the commission's investigation stand into Mississippi Power about $366 million cost overrun last year?
did everybody hear that question? Where does the commission's investigation stand related to the developments of the $366 million cost overrun from last year and then the additional $500 million? You know, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was mighty strange that on 1 week the plant gets a second green light, and the next time, magically, Mississippi Power Company finds this $366 million overrun. Commissioner Bentz is, of course, because he represents that district, is taking the lead on that. He's assigned a special investigator, Jay McKnight, to do interviews related to who knew what, when, and the documents that were obviously not turned over to the Public Service Commission once one of our attorneys had requested them. The other thing is that, of course, Ed Day is out as CEO of Mississippi Power Company. Also is Tommy Anderson. If any of you came to the hearings, Mr. Anderson was the chief witness for Mississippi Power Company, and the gentleman who said that he was confident the plant could be built for $2.4 billion. So there's definitely been a change of leadership, a change of guard at the company. We'll see where it goes from there, Clay. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, there's something we're still digging into. Yes, sir.
Mr. Presley, back in late March and then into April, they passed the special purpose entity bond through the legislature and then was signed by the governor. And I, for one, was surprised at the big majority in the votes that it passed. It seemed to pass with not too much controversy, but of course a lot has happened since that time with the cost overruns and the leaving of some key executives. My name's Ashby Cook with Bigger Pie Forum. My question is, what is the state of political support for the Kemper plant now at this point versus where it was, say, 3 months ago?
Well, let me say this. A lot of the people who came and asked us to pass this and were sending letters and begging and calling, we don't hear much from anymore. As I said, this was from President Obama's Secretary of Energy, writing and personally asked me to change my mind, to Governor Barbour telling us if we didn't pass it, it would be awful and outrageous, to then Governor Bryant literally coming over and in person asking at a commission hearing us to pass this. We hadn't heard much from it. I think that's a very interesting question is, do the people who initially supported it still support it? I just don't see how with a straight face somebody can say I'm a conservative, but I'm all right with raising your power bills 20%. That doesn't pass the straight face test with me. But personally, I have not heard from any of those folks since.
Next question. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I'm Emil Wilson. I'm with a number of groups filming for the Bigger Pie Forum, and maybe I'm just going to be the ridiculous 20-something radical in the room, but why are we still structuring a monopoly and not opening up for competition?
That's a good question. And don't think I hadn't struggled with that over the past 6 years. I found through my time at the commission that many of our regulated monopolies, especially in the electric power sector, and this includes electric power co-ops that are owned by members, like to have their cake and eat it too. They want their monopoly status, but don't want any responsibility to the consuming public. And so it's something I don't know that we shouldn't look at again, just to be honest with you. If you want to have all the pleasures of an unregulated company, then you know what, maybe you need some competition. And I think it's something that, I think that Kemper and the other issues going on throughout the state may very well lead to that discussion. I know the previous commissions had looked at that, but you know, sometimes there are things you ought to revisit. I'm not saying I've made up my mind either way, but it's definitely not something I think we should take off the table. Texas has done a pretty good job related to what they've done out there. And their rates are somewhat different, but their service providers are good, and the way the law is structured seems good. But you know, you're going to have, you think you've had lobbyists lobbying for that $1 billion bond thing, you wait till you start talking about bringing in competition. There's going to be a lot of people forgot about on that. So I think it's something, if the companies are not going to come to the table and be regulated market participants, then I think you should introduce competition to them, period.
Other questions?
Yes, sir, Juan.
Yes.
I don't want to hog the question. When the certificate was issued, it was immediately litigated by Sierra Club. And then it was Hancock County upheld the certificate, and the Supreme Court reversed that. My question is this: given, you know, we're all worried about who's going to have to pay for this,
Right.
Doesn't Southern and Mississippi Power have some liability? In other words, don't the ratepayers have some out from the fact that Southern continued with construction while the certificate was still under litigation?
Well, James Richardson's here. He'll remember when we were working on that dissent in that. I felt like that was the time to say stop until we know more. You know, but that's where the prudency hearings are going to come in. Those are obvious questions that should come up in a prudency determination. Was there a point in time when everybody should have said, whoa? Or was there a point in time in which you should have looked at natural gas? You know, that's something that we've got some Atmos Energy people here. It's not a day goes by we're not getting a request somebody want gas service because it's so cheap now. Was that not a better option? But the issue comes down to the trig technology, the central engine to this plan was owned by Kellogg, Brown & Root, and Southern Company. And so to get this experiment off the ground, they had to find somebody to pay for it. If it was such a wonderful idea, go to Wall Street and get the money. Go, and you can find investors. But no, unwillingly, little old ladies and small business owners got to be the investors. But all that, I think, is going to be part of the prudency determination. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Carl Preston with Bigger Pie. Will the prudency hearings to discuss the issue just mentioned be open? For example, will there be the chance to explore why in 2010, when a number of things converged that said they should have been reevaluated, no construction had begun, that there was no real examination or analysis of the options any different than what had been done back in 2008?
Well, I think that's a very good point. Yes, I believe that'll be open. Anybody who wants to participate can do so. One of the things that added insult to injury to this whole proposal, if you'll remember, was Mississippi Power Company filed the rate impacts to the customers as a confidential document with the commission. So they want to build this, but they don't want to tell you. I knew how much it was going to cost because I had the right to see it. But Mr. and Miss Smith down there paying for this thing had no right to see it. By an old antiquated rule that had been written by and for the utilities to protect this stuff. We got rid of that, thank God. But use that arcane exemption to hide how much customers are going to have to pay. You know, if it's such a big deal, just tell us about it. Tell us what it's going to cost. If it's such a big deal, go to Wall Street and get the money. That's my point. Yes, sir.
Okay, last question.
Well, this really is more of a beef that I have along those same lines. We've been trying at bigger pies, we're trying to get the natural gas price forecasts that were used back in the '09 time frame. And their forecasts that are now 3 or 4 years old, they're in no way proprietary or trade secrets, and yet they use that same confidential treatment as a way to keep them from the public view. We've been through court now for 9 months trying to get those documents.
First of all, we have had those been filed past our new rule, they would have been totally treated separately. Now, the burden is on the company for making a confidential filing, meaning that before then, if XYZ utility filed something and said it was confidential, it was held confidential until a court said unseal it. Our new rule, because of Kemper, changes that, and one of our commission attorneys is the lead person to look at a document and see whether or not it meets the test for confidentiality. So we've shifted that burden. These were filed prior to then, obviously, and of course, I know we've been involved with some stuff in Hinds County Chancery Court related to y'all's request, and you know, I'm definitely for complying with the court. I wish they hadn't been filed that way, but luckily in the future that won't happen again. I don't see how that could, anything about that could be proprietary.
Okay, Commissioner Presley, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.